king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 341, Duke Guide's ambition. In the small town of Gelding in northwestern Germany, the capital of the Principality of Gettys, Duke Charles II was looking at a map and thinking. Looking at the map, Duke Charles II of Gettys was not concerned about the Principality of Gettys itself, but West Frisia in the north. Charles II, Duke of Gages, was an ambitious prince who wanted to expand the territory of the Duchy of Gages and enhance his own strength. But unfortunately, his neighbors were not easy to mess with. For example, his western neighbors included the County of Holland and the Duchy of Brabant, both of which were territories of Philip, the son of Emperor Maximilian I. In fact, the Duchy of Gages had been destroyed and annexed by Maximilian I's father-in-law Charles the Bold before. It was not until 1492 that Charles II took advantage of the riots in Flanders to make Maximilian I, who was preoccupied with his own affairs, agree to restore the Duchy of Gages. Obviously, the Principality of Gettys could not resist the power of the emperor. Therefore, westward expansion was not feasible. The southern neighbors were mainly the Bishopric of Ling, the Principality of Cleves, the Archbishopric of Cologne and the Principality of Jülich. Needless to say, the Archbishop of Cologne was one of the 7 electors, and Charles II did not dare to have the intention of resisting. Even the weakest bishopric of Ling in the south was protected by the Archbishopric of Cologne, so it was difficult to take action. As for the Duchy of Cleves and the Duchy of Jülich, they were both powerful opponents and difficult to deal with. If a war really broke out, Charles II was not sure that he could defeat the two countries. As for the east of the Principality of Gettys, it was mainly the Bishopric of Munster, which was also protected by the Archbishop of Cologne, so it could not take any action. The two neighboring countries in the north were mainly the Archbishopric of Utrecht and West Frisia. Needless to say, the Archbishopric of Utrecht was the power of the Holy See in the Netherlands, but Charles II was not bold enough to challenge the Holy See. Therefore, after much deliberation, only West Frisia was the most suitable place to seize. In fact, since the restoration of the Duchy of Getters in 1492, Charles II had the idea of annexing West Frisia and made a lot of preparations. But plans cannot keep up with changes. Before he could take any action, the Duchy of Saxony took the initiative and occupied West Frisia, making Charles II's plan fail. Charles II was unwilling to accept this, so he secretly supported the 9 former West Frisian nobles, agreed to let them settle in the northern part of the Duchy of Gettys, and encouraged and supported them to gather troops and return to West Frisia to harass the Saxons. However, this was the limit of what Charles II could do, because he did not dare to openly offend Albrecht, Duke of Saxony. In addition to the fact that the Duchy of Saxony was relatively powerful, the ability and prestige of Duke Albrecht himself were also very important reasons. Duke Albrecht of Saxony was a cunning old fox and very greedy, but he was very capable, with strong diplomatic and military abilities. Although the Duchy of Saxony was split from the Electorate of Saxony, Duke Albrecht of Saxony was the uncle of Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, the nominal leader of the Saxon nobles. Therefore, the Duke of Saxony had a high prestige among the Saxon nobles and was the real leader of the Saxon nobles. This is what Charles II, Duke of Getters, fears the most. Because, as the leader of the Saxon nobles, Duke Albrecht of Saxony can easily persuade more than a dozen Saxon nobles to send troops to support him. For example, when the Duchy of Saxony invaded East Frisia, many of the more than 20,000 troops were borrowed from other princes. The most obvious one was the 3,000 plate-armored heavy cavalry lent to him by Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony. Therefore, facing the cunning and prestigious Duke Albrecht of Saxony, the equally cunning Charles II did not confront him head-on, but instigated the 9 nobles of West Frisia to bring their bandit-like troops back to West Frisia from time to time to cause trouble and consume the strength of the Saxons. Originally, Duke Charles II of Gettys had no intention of taking over West Frisia because he lacked sufficient confidence. After all, the power of the Saxon nobles was too strong. However, the Battle of Leer County in East Frisia gave Charles II, Duke of Gettys, great hope. Although Marin defeated the Saxon coalition in the Battle of Leer County, the subsequent interference of various forces forced Marin, who was strong in both military and military, to give up the annexation of West Frisia, which gave Charles II hope. Charles II knew very well that no matter how strong Marin's army was, he could not turn against all the princes. Because Marin was the emperor's man, the public enemy of the princes, most of the princes would not agree to Marin's annexation of West Frisia. Therefore, Marin, who had strong military strength, could not annex West Frisia for the time being due to diplomatic reasons. However, if it was his Principality of Guides who annexed West Frisia, there would not be as many people who opposed it as Marin. Because, after all, the Principality of Guides was also one of the princes who stood on the opposite side of the emperor. The princes were not united at ordinary times, and they would only unite when facing an emperor who wanted to centralize power. Therefore, if the Duchy of Geddes wanted to annex West Frisia, the only people who would oppose it would probably be the Saxon nobles of the Duchy of Saxony. However, although the Saxon nobles were powerful, they were far away in the eastern part of Germany and not strong in the northwest. Moreover, through the Battle of Laer County, Marin lost a lot of the strength of the Saxon nobles, which caused the Duchy of Saxony to suffer a great loss of vitality, and it would take decades to recover. Therefore, Marin's weakening of the Duchy of Saxony gave the Duchy of Geddes more opportunities. After the Battle of Laer County, the Duchy of Geddes began to secretly recruit troops and actively prepare to take advantage of the weakness of the Duchy of Saxony to provoke a war and capture West Frisia. Moreover, recently, Duke Charles II of Geddes sent important intelligence back from his spies in Dresden, the capital of the Duchy of Saxony, that Duke Albrecht of Saxony was ill and very ill. It was a question whether he could survive this year. This immediately shocked Charles II. He knew very well that Duke Albrecht of Saxony was an old fox with great capabilities, but his eldest son George was a fool. If George became the Duke of Saxony, then the power of the Duchy of Saxony would decline. Most importantly, the nobles of the Saxon family would not follow George's lead. When Duke Albrecht of Saxony died, the most prestigious noble of the Saxon family would be Elector Frederick III of Saxony, Duke Albrecht's nephew. By then, other nobles of the Saxon family would only give face to Elector Frederick III of Saxony, and not necessarily to George. At that time, when the Duchy of Geddes and George come into conflict, other Saxon nobles may not be willing to send troops to help. Moreover, after the Battle of Laer County, the Duchy of Saxony paid a compensation of 1 million golden gold coins, and now it is very poor and owes a lot of foreign debts. If it wants to send troops, it does not have enough money and food. If Duke Albrecht were alive, he could still borrow some food and soldiers from various families by relying on his reputation as the leader of the Saxon family. But George didn't have that kind of face. Once the Duke of Saxony died, the strength of the Duchy of Saxony led by George would be greatly reduced. Recently, what made Charles II, Duke of Geddes, even more ecstatic was that his biggest rival, Marin, was unexpectedly involved in the war in the Swiss region. Charles II knew that Switzerland was a sinkhole. Marin fell into that big pit and could not climb out for several years. In addition, as Marin was the emperor's lackey, he was naturally resisted by most of the princes and nobles. Therefore, in terms of diplomatic environment, the Principality of Geddes was better. Therefore, recently, the soldiers of the Principality of Geddes have been training more diligently. Duke Charles II of Geddes has also been studying the map of West Frisia all day long and has begun to prepare for sending troops to West Frisia. Chapter 342. Ada is married. In the office area in front of Emden Palace, Marin was reviewing documents. Suddenly, there was a noise outside. Marin was tired, so he went out to see what was going on. Marin almost died of joy at this sight. Because he saw the great artist Leonardo da Vinci, running for his life in panic. Behind Leonardo da Vinci was the angry old Giocondo. Most importantly, the old Giocondo who was chasing Leonardo da Vinci all the way was holding a wooden stick as thick as a bull. It was obvious that the angry old Giocondo wanted to cripple Ada. Da Vinci and old Giocondo were of similar age, both in their 40s and 50s, so they were not very fast. However, old Giocondo had a serious illness before, and although he was cured by the Mongolian doctor under Marin, his health also declined. Therefore, at the same age, Da Vinci was much healthier. Old Giocondo, however, could not catch up with Ada because of his weak body. Otherwise, Ada would have been beaten flat by a stick long ago. Marin naturally knew why old Giocondo wanted to hunt down Da Vinci. The reason was, of course, because Da Vinci had an affair with someone else's daughter. Leonardo was older than old Giocondo, and when he was Lisa, Giocondo's father, Ada was going to marry her. This made old Giocondo, who once regarded Leonardo as a good friend, very angry, so he picked up a wooden stick and went after Leonardo, wanting to smash Ada's face. Leonardo was not stupid. He ran for his life and ran towards the palace, asking the guards for help. But the guards ignored him, and of course, did not expel him. Because these guards had heard about Leonardo's affair with the young and beautiful Lisa. So, when old Giocondo chased Leonardo, they watched with a mentality of watching the fun. So, the palace guards all watched Ada being chased by his future father-in-law with a smile. Marin also watched with a smile for a while, but Da Vinci was sharp-eyed and saw Marin coming out to watch, so he ran over to ask for help. "My Lord Earl, help." Marin replied with a smile, "Ada, you want to sleep with someone's daughter, so what's the harm in getting hit with a stick or two?" Da Vinci was so angry at Marin's words that he rolled his eyes, but he quickly said, "My Lord Earl, you promised to help me, so you can't go back on your word. Besides, I can help you research various machines in the future." Marin thought about it and it was true. He had promised to deal with Da Vinci before, and asked Angela to help persuade him. However, Angela had only told the old Giocondo couple that she wanted to introduce Lisa Giocondo to an older nobleman. The old Giocondo couple didn't know who it was at first, and thought it was just a nobleman in his 30s, so they agreed without thinking. Unexpectedly, they found out recently that the older guy was Da Vinci, who was older than the old Giocondo. Old Giocondo was immediately furious. He had considered Leonardo da Vinci a good friend. He had never thought that this shameless old man would actually hook up with his niece. If it was someone he didn't know well, old Giocondo might not be angry. But Leonardo da Vinci was an acquaintance of his. Even rabbits don't eat grass near their nests. But Leonardo da Vinci hooked up with his own niece. He was really a beast. Then, the angry old Giocondo duo picked up a wooden stick as thick as a bowl and wanted to beat the beast da Vinci to death. Marin remembered his original promise, and was afraid that Giocondo's stick would damage Leonardo's brain, so he sent guards to stop Giocondo. Then, Marin personally persuaded Giocondo to calm down and hoped that Giocondo would accept the marriage between Leonardo and Lisa. But old Giocondo refused to agree because he thought it was too shameful. His good friend married his daughter. How would he get along with Leonardo da Vinci in the future? Seeing that his persuasion was fruitless, Marin called several of his civil servants to help persuade old Giocondo. But the old man was stubborn and refused to marry his daughter to Leonardo da Vinci, a shameless old man. In desperation, Marin had to use his ultimate move. Marin promised Giocondo that if he agreed to marry Lisa Giocondo to Leonardo da Vinci, Marin would knight Giocondo's son. Although it was not hereditary, it was also very rare. You know, many talented people in Europe fought for a non-hereditary title of knight or knight for their entire lives, but most of them could not get it. Now, with the opportunity before him, for the sake of his young son's future, old Giocondo duo finally wavered. At this time, Da Vinci also saw that old Giocondo was wavering, and hurried out to make up for it, saying that he was willing to give 100 ugrams of the 200 ugrams of land that Marin had given him to his brother-in-law. In this way, and with everyone's persuasion, old Giocondo duo, who had gained huge benefits, finally. So, everyone was happy. Marin quickly ordered the Minister of Finance Kohler to allocate funds for Leonardo da Vinci's wedding. In addition, he also paid for the construction of a new mansion for Leonardo da Vinci and his wife next to the Auric Palace. Of course, there was no rush to repair the house, because Leonardo da Vinci now had his own villa, not without a place to live. Moreover, in order to show his favor, Marin also announced that Leonardo da Vinci's wedding banquet could be held in the palace garden. Of course, after the banquet, Leonardo da Vinci and his wife returned to the villa to live. Even so, it was a great honor for the ministers. Because there had never been a precedent in Europe of lending the royal garden to ministers to hold wedding banquets. After all, the royal palace was a symbol of royal power. Even if they were members of the royal family, they were not eligible to hold wedding banquets in the royal palace unless they were direct descendants. In fact, Marin did this not only to show his favor to Leonardo, but also because the villa where Leonardo lived was too small to hold a wedding banquet. Because Leonardo's villa was in a crowded residential area, there was no spare yard to hold a banquet. It just so happened that Marin's new palace garden was huge, and Marin valued Leonardo da Vinci's scientific talent very much, so he simply lent the palace lawn to Leonardo da Vinci for the wedding banquet. In this way, after obtaining the consent of old Giocondo, Marin hurriedly held a wedding for Leonardo da Vinci. The reason for such a hurry was that Leonardo da Vinci, this shameless old man, had already taken action on Mona Lisa before getting married, and even made Lisa pregnant. You know, Catholicism is against premarital sex. And now the Catholic power is so strong, so Marin had to help the shameless Ada to hold a wedding in a hurry. Otherwise, when Lisa's belly really gets big, it will be embarrassing, and even be criticized by the church. So Marin could only help Ada and Lisa hold a wedding quickly. What made Marin laugh and cry was that Angela was envious of Lisa's quick pregnancy. So after Da Vinci and Lisa got married, Angela asked Marin to pay public grain every day except when she had her period so that she could get pregnant quickly. After Leonardo got married, Marin rewarded Ada with a newly built mansion, 10,000 gold coins and 100 ugrams of farmland to make up for the loss of his brother-in-law. At the same time, he also rewarded Leonardo with the title of hereditary knight and appointed him as the Minister of Science in the court, giving Ada enough face. In this way, with the help of Marin, the 48-year-old bachelor Ada married a beautiful woman, had money, land and a mansion, and suddenly reached the peak of his life. Chapter 343 Old Sten Sturly Steen Staury the Elder was the ruler of Sweden and had ruled Sweden and Finland for a long time. Sweden had been controlled by Denmark for a long time and was under the rule of the Kalmar Union. However, Sweden had always been dissatisfied with the rule of Denmark. The independence faction led by Sten Staury the Elder had been seeking to break away from the rule of the Kalmar Union and make Sweden an independent country. For this reason, Sten Sture the Elder once supported the native Swedish nobleman Charles VIII as the King of Sweden, declared independence, and withdrew from the Kalmar Union. However, Charles VIII died in 1470 without leaving a legitimate heir, so after Charles VIII's death, Sten Sture the Elder became regent of Sweden, including Finland, and ruled Sweden until 1497. However, Sweden was also not united. Many of the Swedish nobles were inclined to join the Kalmar Union and accept the joint rule of Denmark. In addition, Sweden currently did not have a legitimate monarch, and Sten Sture the Elder was only a regent. Therefore, Sweden was not united and was divided into the independence faction headed by Sten Sture the Elder and the Kalmar Union faction that supported Danish rule. Originally, under the strong rule of Sten Sture the Elder, the Unionists were at a disadvantage and could not compete with the Independencists. However, after the Danish King Hans from the Oldenburg family succeeded to the throne, he adopted a brilliant political strategy to win over the Swedish nobles and secretly supported the Unionist nobles who opposed Sten Sture the Elder, instigating them to confront Sten Sture the Elder. As a result, Sweden was internally divided and its strength was weakened. In 1497, the Danish King Hans took advantage of the serious internal divisions in Sweden and sent a large army to invade Sweden. Although the old Sten Sture was very capable, he was helpless because the domestic alliance faction was willing to act as a guide for the Danish army and repeatedly took the initiative to open the city gates to welcome the Danish army. In desperation, the old Sten Sture had to give in, officially recognized Hans as the King of Sweden, and held a coronation ceremony for him. Originally, that was the way it was. After all, the Danes were powerful, and even if old Sten Sture wanted independence, he couldn't make any waves without his power being taken away. However, it just so happened that the powerful Danish King Hans committed suicide, causing Denmark to suffer serious losses, which made old Sten Sture see hope for Swedish independence again. The thing is, King Hans of Denmark, in addition to being the King of Denmark, Norway and Sweden, is also the Duke of the Duchy of Schleswig and the Duchy of Holstein in Germany. On the southwestern coast of the Duchy of Schleswig, close to the Elbe River along the North Sea, there was a region called Dithmarschen, later Dithmarschen County. Influenced by the neighboring Hanseatic Free City of Hamburg and the Hanseatic Free City of Lübeck, it began to govern itself, refused to recognize the rule of the Duchy of Schleswig, and planned to learn from Hamburg and Lübeck and establish a Hanseatic Free City. How could King Hans agree to this? Dithmarschen was a large area. So, after taking the Swedish throne, Hans was full of ambition and decided to conquer the disobedient Dithmarschen people by force. So, on February 17, 1500, King Hans of Denmark and his brother Duke Frederick led 4,000 elite Dutch mercenaries, 2,000 plate knights, 1,000 artillerymen and 5,000 conscripts, a total of 12,000 troops, and marched towards Dithmarschen. At the same time, in the Dithmarschen area, there were only 1,000 skilled militiamen and 3,000 auxiliary militiamen. No matter how you look at it, King Hans of Denmark is sure to win. However, Wolf Esprand, the commander of the Dithmarschen resistance, was a very crazy but smart commander. Wolf Esprand knew that if they faced each other head-on, it would be impossible for Dithmarschen's 1,000 militiamen and 3,000 civilians to resist the attack of the Danish army. So he came up with a crazy idea of flooding the 7 armies. Well, let's use this name to describe his plan. Dithmarschen is located on the North Sea coast, with the Elbe River to the south. There are many rivers here, but the terrain is not flat, and there are ups and downs. There are reservoirs that are much higher than the horizon. In order to resist the Danish army, Wolf Esprand decided to dig the dam and release the flood to drown the Danes. To this end, he specially chose the village of Hemmingstedt downstream of the local reservoir as the battlefield. Although the village of Hemmingstedt is located downstream of the dam, it is on high ground downstream of the dam. Even if there is a flood, the village will not be submerged. However, the surrounding areas are flat land, and the flood cannot be stopped. Wolf Esprand built, and then quietly waited for the arrival of the Danish army with 1,000 militiamen. King Hans of Denmark was very proud of conquering the powerful Sweden. In addition, the strength of the two sides was extremely asymmetric, so Hans never thought that the Dithmarschen resistance had any chance. Therefore, Hans did not order scouts to carefully investigate the local situation during the march. After hearing that all the resistance forces of Dithmarschen were in the village of Hemmingstedt, he immediately led 12,000 troops to surround the village of Hemmingstedt. However, just after the Danish army surrounded the village of Hemmingstedt, the 3,000 Dithmarschen militiamen who had been prepared arrived at the dam according to the instructions given by Wolf Esperand, used farm tools, and dug up the dam. Suddenly, the rolling water rushed downstream with great force. The Danish army was attacking the village of Hemmingstedt and had no idea that a flood would come. As a result, a large number of Danish soldiers were swept away by the flood and flowed directly to the North Sea. In this Battle of Hemmingstedt, a total of 7,000 Danish soldiers were drowned and 1,500 were injured. In this way, the extremely powerful Danish army was defeated and fled by the local militia resistance of Dithmarschen, and its vitality was seriously damaged. If it weren't for his men's desperate protection, Hans himself would have almost drowned. The 2,000 plate armor knights under Hans's command, because they were wearing heavy plate armor, could not float when they were washed away by the flood. Many people drowned directly, and only a few people who were lucky enough not to be swept away by the flood survived. In this era, the plate armor knights were an important strategic force of European countries. Most of them were drowned in this battle, which was considered to be a serious blow to Denmark's vitality. Seeing that Denmark was seriously injured, the former Swedish ruler Sten Sture became active immediately. Obviously, due to the loss of a large number of plate knights, Denmark was now seriously short of officers. So, Sten Sture secretly sent people to Lübeck, Hamburg, and other countries and forces hostile to the Kalmar Union such as the Teutonic Kingdom to seek help, hoping that they would fund him, recruit resistance forces, and seek Swedish independence again. Old Sten. The fact that Sture sent people to the Teutonic Kingdom for help naturally could not be hidden from Marin's second uncle Jules. After all, Jules is now an important civil servant under the command of Philip, the Grand Master of the Teutonic Kingdom. Jules knew that Denmark would become uneasy, and his nephew Marin's fleet must pass through the Sound or the Great Belt under the control of Denmark. Once Sweden launched an independence war, Denmark would inevitably impose tolls on merchant ships passing through its waters in order to raise military funds. Therefore, Jules secretly brought this news to Marin through a merchant ship under Marin's command through a secret letter. Old Sten Sture. I seem to have some impression of him. Marin began to recall the European history he had learned. From the corner deep in his memory, Marin finally remembered who this person was. It seems, this guy is quite awesome, and it seems he will succeed in achieving independence next year. Should I support him? However, this guy seems to have died in 1503. Marin was very distressed. According to his memory, Marin knew that old Sten Sture was a great man, but he didn't live long. He died in 1503, just 2 years after independence from Denmark in 1501. You know, he was born in 1440 and was only 60 years old. In later generations, he had not yet reached the revised retirement age of 65. So, he died so early, obviously because of illness. After the death of Sten Sture the Elder, Sweden lacked a strong leader, so its resistance against Denmark fell into a low ebb, and in 1509 it was once again forced to recognize Hansa's status as king. Marin thought about it and decided to give old Sten Sture a large sum of money so that he would have enough strength to fight against Denmark. In addition, Marin also planned to send someone to the Golden Horde to hire a good Mongolian doctor to serve as old Sten Sture's personal doctor to protect his health. As for whether old Sten Sture would accept the Mongolian doctor, this is easy. Marin plans to subsidize old Sten Sture with 100,000 golden gold coins. If old Sten Sture is unwilling to accept the Mongolian doctor as his personal doctor, Marin will not give him the 100,000 gold coins. The reason why Marin supports old Sten and Sture to resist Denmark is that Marin also has a grudge against the Danes. With the support of Denmark, the county of Oldenburg became extremely arrogant and interfered in the internal affairs of the county of East Frisia. Marin still could not control the Jever region. Marin's plan was that after old Sten Sture launched the War of Independence, Denmark's energy would be tied up. At that time, Marin would directly send troops to capture Jeffer and wipe out the resistance forces in Jeffer in one fell swoop. At that time, when Denmark was unable to support him, Marin could completely ignore the county of Oldenburg. Because the county of Oldenburg was just relying on the power of Denmark. Without the support of the Danes, if the people of Oldenburg dared to intervene in front of Marin's army, Marin would not mind giving them a good lesson.